In this tutorial, we'll show you how to create transparency in Gizmo. We have an experiment here where we have a Gaussian surface displayed in Gizmo. The surface is displayed using the default rainbow color table. To demonstrate any sort of transparency effect, we need at least two objects. So it is quite easy to pick up another example object by going to the object menu, append new object, and we'll append the sphere, and we'll set the radius of the sphere to 0.5. When we go back here to the object list, we see a sphere which we'll drag over to the display list, and we have a sphere displayed. It's displayed with the last color that was being drawn, which happens to be red now, but we can create a new color specific for this sphere, and I'm going to choose a reasonably dark gray color. When I take this color from the attribute list and I drop it on the sphere object, the sphere becomes gray as one would expect. Well, at this point, the sphere is opaque and you cannot see the Gaussian surface through the sphere. So before we can actually apply any sort of transparency, we need to enable the blending in the display list. So to do that, we do an append new operation and we choose enable, and the default is blend, so we say OK, and we get an enable blend here. We'll put the blend right after surface 0 so that our Gaussian surface gets drawn first without any difference in terms of how it's getting drawn, but the objects that are going to be drawn after that are going to be drawn with some blending. To choose the type of blending, we go to the attribute list and we choose a blend function. The blend function that we'll choose is going to be source alpha, and the destination is going to be 1 minus source alpha. So we're going to say OK here, and we have a blend function. This particular blend function is going to keep the whatever is already drawn into the buffer unchanged, and then it will draw the new or the additional subsequent surfaces using whatever alpha value they have. It will use that when it is blending their value. If I drag the blend function here into the display list, we have a sequence of the surface that remains the same without change. We enable the blend, we add the blend function, and then we draw the additional object. The x's are sort of irrelevant because they're really not going to blend, so I'm going to move them out of the way. And now we have the blend function followed by the sphere. We still don't see any transparency because the alpha for the sphere is identically 1, which means that it's drawn without any transparency. So we'll go here to the color and we'll change the alpha in the color specification from alpha of 1 to alpha of 0.5. If I say OK, you can see now that I can see the Gaussian surface through the sphere. Okay, so at this point I can see that we have a translucent sphere through which we see a surface, and in some orientations you can actually see some undesirable side effects here. These are caused by the way that OpenGL creates the sphere, and to minimize those you can double click on the sphere object and choose a larger number of slices and stacks, and that will minimize the effect, as you can see here on the edge of the sphere. Okay, now let's see what sort of interesting effects we have. If we change the order of drawing, namely we'll draw the sphere first and the surface second, you'll notice that there is no transparency effect because our blend function uses the source alpha of the surface, in this case of the Gaussian surface, and that is identically 1, and therefore there is going to be no translucency. So we'll move that back so we have the previous order, and we can have a transparent object or translucent object through which we see the surface. If you have multiple objects, you have to worry about the order in which they are being displayed. So for example, you can come over here and choose another object that is going to be say a disk, and we're going to just choose a default disk and add that to the display list. So at this point the disk is drawn with an alpha of 1 because it doesn't have any particular color. And if we're going to choose a color for the disk, suppose we choose blue, and we say okay, again it's going to be blue, but its alpha is 1. Okay, so the sphere is still translucent, okay, but the disk which is drawn through it is not. Okay, in order to blend those better, we're going to have to go to the color for the disk and change that to something that is less than 1, say 0.5 again. And now we have an interesting effect that we can actually see part of the sphere through the disk and then see the Gaussian surface through the disk. Now, if we're going to change the order where the disk is drawn before the surface, you will notice that there are going to be differences in how the translucency appears. So in this demonstration we showed you how to create transparency or translucent objects in Gizmo, and we emphasized that the order of appearance of items on the display list is crucial for getting the correct visual effect. This concludes this demonstration.